let me give you an example, and I'm actually going to write an essay about this. Uh, I think I mentioned earlier interviews this essay I written about this woman named Maggie Estep. She was a poet with the New Eurekan Poets back in the late '80s, early '90s that I knew, and she died a couple of years ago. And I wrote an essay about 6 months after her death when I just found out about her death. And so I was looking a couple of days ago, and I found out another woman that I had known had died. Her name was Judith Kitchen. And I had met her in 1987 at the Brockport Writers Festival in upstate New York at Brockport University, the State University of New York. She and her husband, a guy named Stan Rubin, ran this festival. This is where I met that William Matthews guy. And she was, a very nice woman, but she had no real particular writing talent. Um, she was probably best in writing essays. She would write, I guess she called them sort of personal essays, but they were nowhere in a league with a James Baldwin or Lauren Isley. At best, they were good, solid. Her poetry wasn't necessarily doggerel, but it was utterly generic. Her fiction that I read was mediocre, but again, she was a nice woman. And I looked and I saw all these writings of praise for her. She wrote reviews for 20 plus years for like the Georgia Review, which is one of these college magazines that has maybe a circulation of 2 or 3,000, 98% of which ends up in college libraries that nobody reads. And when she died, the Los Angeles Review of Books apparently had four no-name MFA writers basically writing about how influential she was and what a great critic she was. And I've actually got some of her stuff. I'm going to have to tear it apart. And I do it so with hesitation because, again, she was a nice woman. But there's this fucking tendency to always overpraise, not even mediocrity, but sub-mediocre writing just because you like the person. And this is the frustrating thing is you can see in her writing, especially her poetry, which is the weakest of all of her writing, an absolute lack of understanding of taking, experimenting, playing. Words are supposed to be goddamn fun. You get none of that in her writing. Her husband, a guy named Stan Rubin, was in some ways even, more guilty of that.